welcome everyone to my sessions today at SBS Warsaw. So the name is The Road to the Teams from SharePoint. Normally we we do this on Saturdays, but today is Friday, so we should rename it to SharePoint Friday. That should be fun. Thank you, organizers. I mean, without Thomas, Eddie, and Martin, we won't be here. And we were supposed to be in Warsaw, but online has been working great today. So I'm pretty happy for that. And of course, thank you our sponsors and partners. I've been sponsoring myself in SharePoint Saturday in Oslo. I know that there's a lot of work involved, and there's of course always a cost. So thank you very much. And of course, without you guys who spend the day with us to attend, won't be happening either. So thank you everyone for joining me today. Just a few words about myself. My name is Jimmy. I'm a technical architect at White, based in Norway. I've been doing SharePoint for the last 13 years. I started in 2007, actually. So I'm doing mostly SharePoint on-premise, and then I do SharePoint training, and then SharePoint online, and then now we have Teams. So it's a natural process to evolve. So I'm lucky to have the opportunity to do only that. Haven't had the need to learn anything else than SharePoint and Office 365. Very happy for that. All right, I do have a blog. I'm on Twitter. Feel free to connect if you have the chance. The agenda for today is not that big, so I'm just going to introduce you guys for the collaboration apps we have in Office 365, just a quick intro, and then I will talk about SharePoint and Teams and differences between those, and then I will show you some demos on how to convert SharePoint to Teams and what kind of thing we need to think about. And then finally, some tips and tricks about how to manage all of this. And in the end, of course, questions and answers. I will try my best to answer anything that you might have in mind. If there's anything I don't know about, I will figure it out. Ask somebody who knows. All right, this is the periodic table that Matt created a while back. I've been using this pretty much actually when I have a meeting with clients and they want to know what is in Office 365. So it's a lot of things. So the focus today is only the SharePoint Online part of it and how to move that to Teams and what's the connection between those two applications. And if you've been following us for today, a lot of other speakers have talked about Power Apps, and there will be something about forms later today. There's been a lot of good content throughout the day. Right. So, as I said, I'm a SharePoint dude. So when Teams got releases and everything Microsoft did was just move to Teams, and they just didn't have that much talk about SharePoint or for that kind of thing, Skype. So I was like, what am I going to do now? Like, I can only do SharePoint, and that what is Teams? I really don't know how they are connected. So that's the kind of feeling I had in the beginning. But after I think a couple of projects, like half a year after the release of Teams, when I see the connection between the two products, I realized that those two things are actually the same thing, just in different wrappings, right? So SharePoint does have some features that Teams don't, and the other thing is that Teams does have some features that SharePoint don't. So together they make a better product, and that's very, very useful for our end users. And during the last years, for every project I've done on Teams, one of the biggest things we've learned is that the amount of time we need to do user training has decreased a lot. So back in the SharePoint times, I need to use like lots and lots of times to do user training, But in Microsoft Teams, I really don't need to do that much. So I can do use my time to do other useful stuff. All right, so let's talk about some background architecture though. As you might know, everything related to Teams in Office 365 is related to Office 365 Group. So we need to know what Office 365 Group is in order to actually understand how Teams work. So Office 365 Groups is a collection of services that Microsoft created way before Teams was a product. So this is a collection. It's almost like a front end of services. You got Teams, you got Outlook, you got SharePoint, you got Azure AD for user management. You got SharePoint for the file management. You got Outlook for the conversation we had in the back of the days, and then every other services that we have in Office right now today's is connected to a group. So when you create a Jammer group, is actually also Office 365 Group in the backend. If you create a new SharePoint site, it's mostly a group connected. If you do create a Teams, it's also an Office 365 Group. And even though if you have if you created a Power BI report and you publish that Power BI report to a set of users, that is also an Office 365 Group in the backend managing the what we call it, the permission sets to the reports. So Office Group is the fundamental, the pillars of Teams, and for now also SharePoint. So for the SharePoint part, and if you're familiar with SharePoint, it hasn't changed much through the years. Mostly we get graphical user interface changes, but the backend stuff hasn't changed much. So we still get the default user roles of owners, members, visitors. We still have pages, files, sites. So those kind of architecture is the same. If you have SharePoint on-premise or you have SharePoint Online, those things are still the same. In SharePoint Online, we get a better, what do you call it, user interface, and everything is built more user-friendly and mobile-friendly. And back in the days when we have to do inviting guests to our SharePoint on-premises, we have to do a lot more infrastructure investments in order to make it happen. Nowadays, when we go to SharePoint Online, the guest part of it is managed by Azure AD, so you don't need to build the infrastructure needed to do that. So basically, this is what SharePoint is. So you got different user roles, you got files, lists, portals, and pages. That is the SharePoint part of it. And you create different libraries, you create different lists for different things. You create different portals for containing different kind of content. While I normally do this question just to figure out how many of you is on SharePoint on-premise today. Does anyone have any answers to that? Maybe just type it in the chat or unmute. But so basically, before you start thinking about how to convert stuff, you need to do some backend work. So you need to know, are you having SharePoint on-premise today? Are you doing that in SharePoint? Are you having SharePoint Online? And if you have SharePoint Online, are you in SharePoint Classic or are you in SharePoint Modern? And are you having subsites today, like SharePoint subsites? And what kind of permission sets do you have in the SharePoint site? And many of you still have file shares. I am pretty sure you do. And that's the kind of thing we cannot get rid of very fast. I think 80% of my clients are still having file share for department stuff or legacy stuff or some other weird stuff. So Even though they're using SharePoint for most of the collaboration stuff, file share still exists and live in most of the clients' situations today. All right, Teams. Teams is a lot easier, but it's still not. But it's still a complex product, though. It's still a complex app, but it's a lot easier in the amount of that. If you do permissions, teams only have two roles. You have the owner role of a team, and you have the member role of the team. And if you add a guest to a team, that guest is added into the member role. So they will have the same permission sets as an internal member of the team. While in SharePoint, you can actually add a guest only as a visitor, so they have only read access, but not write access to the site. So that is not available in Teams at all. So that makes things a lot easier. And the other thing is that in Teams, you cannot have nested groups. So you cannot add AD group into team as a member. What Team does is that it will collect all the users and add them as individual members. And the whole thing make it easier for the owner of the team to manage who is actually having what permissions. And it's make also, the removal of the users and adding new users much easier than what SharePoint ever was. So that is the one thing that most of my users, my clients, like about Teams. The whole thing make it a lot easier and more transparent to that. And in Teams, the content we can create is channels containing discussions and different topics. We have files, which actually is in SharePoint. We have different tabs. So tabs is actually just a link. It's an iframe, basically. It's an iframe presenting content from either your internal Office 365 stuff or your external websites. Depends on whatever you want to use it to. And then Teams have the audio and video conferencing tool that Skype for Business had, and what we are using today to do these sessions. Yes, so that's about Team. So for my part of it, the biggest difference is the way it manages users, and that is a huge difference. All right, there's some things I do miss in Teams today. Some of it has been fixed. I don't know many of you who was at the session that Rob did on the private channels. That was one of the things we missed, but it's now completed. So what I miss right now in Teams is two things. The full capability of a SharePoint library in the Files tab. It doesn't exist today. Today we have something, but it's still not the full SharePoint library controls. And because of that, we cannot run, for example, Flow directly in Teams. I have an error in my slide. It's actually running Flow in Teams, not SharePoint. Meaning that if you want to run, for example, an approval flow, you have to instruct your user to go to SharePoint and then run the flow from there. In many user cases, that's fine. But for those of us who really come from SharePoint, where we are used to building different kind of processes containing approvals and sign off and all of that, it's kind of hard to not have that feature directly into the Teams client. So hopefully Microsoft will bridge that gap during the next few months. I have no idea if that's going to happen or not, but I really hope it will. Mostly it will do that. All right, that's me talking. Let's see how this thing works though. All right, the first thing I will show you is of course SharePoint, right? So let's jump into SharePoint. And the first thing we will see is the classic SharePoint site. So the classic SharePoint site is originated, I think the user interface we are looking at is from SharePoint 2013 or something. There's a couple of things you need to know, though, is that if you are running SharePoint 2010 or SharePoint 2013, you can migrate that content directly into the SharePoint site connected to your team with the SharePoint migration tool. If you have anything else in that, you have to use third-party tools. I will have a summary about that later. So this is the classic team sites. Many of you maybe still are here, and most of the reason why we are still here is because of the our users are used to this, and there might be that you have some apps built for the classic SharePoint and not for the modern SharePoint. And of course, Microsoft has done a lot of changes during the last couple of months. So right now, new tenants don't even have classic sites at all. So, but most of you might have noticed that you have the pages in classic, but when you go into a list or a library, you might be switched into the modern view in SharePoint. If you haven't turned off that feature, though, that you only keep the classic throughout the tenant, then you will be redirected to the modern library views. And many of you will have a situation where you have classical subsites, meaning that your SharePoint site is built on other subsites containing a lot of other content in the subsites. So in order to make your classic SharePoint, compatible to Teams, you have to migrate all of your classic SharePoints out of the root site into new site collections. That way you can convert them into Teams. So that work requires a lot of planning. So most of the time, when we want to do this, we have to have an inventory check to export and see how many sites is connected to having subsites and what kind of content do they have, what kind of permission set do they have, and then that way you can plan your team architecture and your team permissions. Because many of the subsites are related to, for example, if you have a SharePoint site containing a lot of projects, then most certainly those classic subsites, project sites are in a subsites architecture, not site collection architecture. So that's kind of thing that we need to work on. Either way, when you have a classic team site and you need to convert this, you can do a couple of things. You can just create a new modern page and add that as a new homepage, and that will convert your classic site into a modern site. So you go into the pages library here. Let's see here. And let's see if I can. I cannot. Let me check the feature. So let me just double check this site feature here. Yeah, it is activated. Yeah. So if you are running a classic site, you need to make sure the site collection feature, site pages, is enabled in the site. That way we can create thing. Right, so this is our modern SharePoint page. Let me name this one home. Or just call it home. And right. Yeah. Text. and then publish the page. There you go. And then you can go back into your pages library and choose to convert that one to your default home page. You can also do this using PNP PowerShells and a lot of different kind of tools, but this is the basic way to do it though. And then you will get the whole site will then be converted into a modern graphical user interface. And that will be more consistent with your library experiences and your list experiences for the end users. Just make sure that your list is not operating in the classic mode. Now, after you've done that, you need then to convert or connect this SharePoint team site into a group. So, and that is a feature right in the settings of the site. Just connect that, and then it will ask you some verifications. You want to do this? Yeah, sure, let's do it. And then you can choose like privacy settings. This is the group-based stuff. And it's like admin is not a user. Let's do this. And there you go. So after your site has been converted into a modern group, you will get the option to create a team right there in the bottom of the site. Let's create a team, and this is super fast. I mean, I've done this a lot of times, and the converting part of it is super fast. So this is my classic team site, and it is now a Teams connected site. And in the backend, you will get the files library. And if I go back to my classic sites here, you will see that you will have this is my document library, and then I've got the general folder, which is connected to now this Teams here. So let me just create a new demo file. Right. Yep, we're good to go. Cool. So that is what you need to do for the classic stuff. So basically, for those of you migrating from SharePoint on-premises 2013 or 2010, don't migrate the whole site because the classic stuff, or you have some custom code and that kind of thing, won't work well in SharePoint Online. So my recommendation is that you only migrate the content of the libraries and the list, if there's any, you need to have in your new site. All right. Any questions to that? Cool. So the next thing is, okay, where the hell is all of my other files? So in the classic team site here, we have a channel called general, but where is my other stuff? So because in this library here, you have a lot of other folders, you have other files, you have other content here. So there is a couple of options you can do. So some of my clients just link this library into this one general channels as a SharePoint library by adding the tab. So you just go documents, and then you choose the classic site. Where is my classic site? Okay, just grab this. Right. And then you get the library, and you can just add it into the as a tab. right? And the tab will contain all folders, everything that you had in that SharePoint site before you convert it in your team, right? The other option is that you can convert the root library, the root folder, I mean, into a channel. So if I, for example, in my new team site, create a channel, I can name that one folder ABC. You have to use the exact same folder name as the SharePoint folders. And then it cannot be private though, because if you use a private, it will create a totally different site collection in the backend, and it will not be linked into the folder in the first site, SharePoint site. So I will add that. Right, and if you go here, we see that the files is in here, available from SharePoint directly into from the library itself. So it really is about the structure of your team, because for the channel part of it, it is used as a filter for the conversations and the engagement you have in each of the folders. Sometimes the folder structure you have in SharePoint doesn't match up with the way Teams and channel works. So just have some thought about that. And I've been doing this a lot the last 2 years, and there is no one solution to how to structure the folders. It's all up to your users and how your client want to organize things. So, but basically, it is very easy to adjust and then make and then move it around. It's not that hard. So just make sure that you know the connecting between the folders and the files and the whole library in the backend. As long as you know how they are connected together, so this folder represents that folder in SharePoint, you're good to go. And if I create a new folder here, let me say add a new channel, SPS. Sometimes I use the I tell my users that if you look at SharePoint as Teams as your file share, the name of the Teams will be the root folder, and then the channels will be the subfolder to that root folder again, and that makes things a lot easier to understand. And then you get all the other features like versioning in SharePoint. You got conversations in Teams and all the good stuff that comes with that. So the next kind of site is that you can also have, per now, modern SharePoint sites that has been created before the group stuff or before the team stuff that users are familiar with. Now you want to help them convert that into Teams. And one of the main reasons we do that is because if you just use SharePoint part of this, the file collaboration part is the same. But the one thing that we missed is that you don't have the conversation part of it as Teams have. So basically what happens is that when a user needs to discuss things about a file, you either have to copy that link, send it into an email, or maybe just download the file and send it as attachment. It depends on how the users do that. But what we found out is that it makes the collaboration around the file, the discussions about the files, a lot harder in SharePoint only. So when you convert that into Teams, that makes the whole process a lot easier. So we found out that the users collaborate more about files, and they stop using the check changes in files, which is actually pretty confusing and annoying feature. So you do exactly the same thing. So when it is already a modern SharePoint site, you really don't need to create a new homepage and do all of that stuff. What you just need to do is connect that directly into a group, and then convert that group into a team. So please follow here. And then you will get the same menu, connect to a group. I just realized that my site is in Norwegian. Sorry about that. And then you get the same menu as I showed you earlier. Just convert that, and we're good to go. Oh, remove that again. So as I said, teams don't have the concept of nested group. So each and every member has to be individually added into the team. All right, there it is again. So this is a new one. There you go. So just create a team. So I found out that this one here is more consistent now during some of the last updates and before. Before you have to wait for it, and it might be some time before it shows up though. So here we go. Here are my files. And then it will create the general channel, and then you do the same thing. You can either add a tab with that library, or you just create a folder with, yeah, more or less the same thing. So let me just create a folder connected to finance. Oh. And there should be my files. There you go. They're all there. So one of the things you need to be, is that Teams, the files in Teams are actually the folders, as I mentioned before. So basically, every files that you have outside of a folder is not available in Teams. So the question you will have sometimes is that some of users have created files and they save it into the root of the library, and that is not available in Teams, so they cannot see that. So it depends on, again, on the architecture. You might want to move those files into one of the folders, right? Just move into general. Or you might want to just add that library as a tab. That is also another option you can do. Right? So now I just move those files into general, so all my files are available here. There you go. So the last sample I have is a SharePoint Modern group, which means that the SharePoint site is created newly, and that site is already connected to a group. So you can see that here. So if it does, it is either private or public group. You can see that in below the title of the site. And then based on that, the team stuff is already an option. So you don't need to connect it to a group or convert it to Modern or that kind of thing. It is already available. So you just convert it into a team. I normally do this through the Teams, to the SharePoint interface. You can, of course, also do that through to the Teams interface, but I feel like I have more control of what kind of sites am I converting right now, and vice versa, other than doing that through Teams though. So that's my personal opinion. So here you go, and you get all those fantastic teams in here. So for our users, this is very, very easy to understand. So this is my root folder, this is my subfolder, is all my discussions, and here's all my files. So there's no need to do an extended amount of user training on this. So many of the users just understand it after a quick demo.
Jimmy?
Yes.
Sorry, there are questions on the chat
Sure.
About PMove options. Sometimes Tanya says that they don't find the place they want to copy to. So is it sometimes related to permissions or
internal in Teams, or?
I mean, she's asking how do she can find these sites on SharePoint where she can copy more.
Yeah. So I understand. So basically, for example, here in SharePoint, though, so we have a file here, and then we need to copy that file somewhere. So when you use the copy to or move to, you just don't see the site here. And that is mostly related to permissions. So you need to have permission, write permission to that site, and that is one thing. And some other times it is because of the index engine in SharePoint Online. Sometimes the site that you are moving content to, it doesn't show up in this view because of the index. So this is I think this is church driven. I haven't have a look in the backend here, but I'm pretty sure it is church driven. So if you have the permission to the site but it's not showing up, it's mostly because the index hasn't crawled that site and you haven't shown it yet. So mostly it's because the site is newly created. For example, if you just create a new team and then you go into SharePoint and want to copy content to that newly team site, it won't show up because the index hasn't had the time to crawl that new site yet. So have some patience. But it should be like a couple of minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. It should be available for you to copy or move content around in Teams though. And most of the times, except from the sub-site part of things. So let me go back here and show you the sub-site. So this sub-site is not available anywhere, right? So it in SharePoint, but it won't show up anywhere in Teams at all. So what you will do mostly is that you will copy the content here out of the sub-site and into a newly created team. That's what we use a lot of time to do normally. And I have some tips on that actually. Let me show you that. So that is the conversion of Teams. Let me see how far I have gone. Yes, so I have some last. I have some 10 minutes left. Let me show you some other cool thing here. So, as I said, what I miss the most is I really want to have the full SharePoint capability in Teams, but right now is not available. Which, for example, I go into my files here. And let me just move that file. Oh, come on. No, this one stopped working. But anyway, let's move. Right, there it is. So when we go back here, and I just, So after the last changes, I missed the refresh button in Teams. So Teams is just a web client is caching the file, so I need to do that. It's pretty annoying because before that we had this refresh button right here. So right here you have a lot of menu here, and this menu is can do a lot of things like download, delete, do all of that, but you cannot do workflow. So you cannot start a flow. You cannot do publish a file if you are using content approval and you want to publish and then approve and then available for the rest of the users. Those kind of things are not available right now. And that is a feature gap. So what we have to do today is that we have to instruct our user to open this in SharePoint. So they have to click that button. The SharePoint will open, and then they can do the SharePoint stuff like let me see. Like request a sign off and do that kind of thing. So the trick though is that if you want this here to be partly available in SharePoint, what you can do is that you can copy the link to the page from now. So basically, this is my SharePoint site. This is my library. And this is the page, the all item page. So if you have different views, you can just copy that page. So I just copy that. And in Teams here, what you can do is that you can add a tab, but the tab is not a SharePoint library and is not a SharePoint page. it is actually a web page. So it's a random web page out of here. So this is the let me just call it SharePoint library page, right? And then you just save that. And there you go. So you will then have, yeah, so I opened the all documents now. So as you can see here, the main difference is that because this is an iframe, what we have is that we will have the full SharePoint menu, right? Wait, sorry, the tool just. Okay, what happened? There you go. Yeah, so when we do that, then you can directly in Teams do the the Power Automate, and you get the full menu, and then well, where is my menu? What? Let's see. Okay, I need to do the general page. Let me try the whole thing. Oh. Huh, it works the other day. Okay, let me give it another try. If I do the whole URL. Second test. Maybe this one. No. Okay, there you go. And what happened with the menu? Huh. Okay, sorry about that. I will double check this. Somehow the menu is the same as the other one. Okay, I have to recheck that. Okay, cool. Let's move on here. Migration tools. If you have content in FileShare, if you have content in SharePoint 2010, if you have content in SharePoint 2013, you can use the SharePoint migration tool or the mover tool that Microsoft has created as both to migrate the content you have in those repositories to the SharePoint online sites connected to the team site you are using. If you have SharePoint 2016 or 2019, you have to use third-party tools, and it can be ShareGate, Quest, or any other tool that you have experience with. If you have SharePoint Online in the same tenant, you have to use third-party tools, ShareGate, Quest, anyone. If you have SharePoint Online in a different tenant, actually I haven't tried this with the mover yet, but based on what I've seen, it can move content between a SharePoint Online tenant to another SharePoint Online tenant. I haven't tried that. Otherwise, you have to use third-party tool. So that is the options that we have. And it really doesn't matter if you're moving from a FileShare, SharePoint Online to SharePoint Online, or a subsite in SharePoint Online to a site collection in SharePoint Online. You have to do the migration outside of business hour. So you have to move content outside of business hour from your time zone. And even though you will get throttled by Microsoft during the heavy loads, it will be as severe as you will get like you go to you start a job to migrate, and then you want to go back and do some other thing in SharePoint, and you will get like the service too busy, the site is not available. So you will get that a lot. So plan the migration outside of business hour. Very, very important. I've tried many times with Microsoft, just asking, can you lift the be troubling a little bit. I just need to do this in a week or two. The answer has always been no. They don't do that. So we need to plan that accordingly, right? Okay, so some takeaways. Scan your SharePoint inventory. Very, very important. You need to know what kind of where your content source is, if it's on-premise, if it's online, what kind of permission you have into that. You have to plan merging or splitting sites into site collections. So use third-party tools. If you are online, you cannot, otherwise it will be very, you can move like files manually with the move or copy files, but that's really not a good way to do it. Sometimes I've tried that, and the limit is 300 items. You can't move more items than that. The system just won't let you do it. Review your folders, because the folders can be converted into a channel in Teams. That makes the whole thing easier for the end users. But not every folder can be converted into team because the name might be different, or it doesn't make sense. You just need to make sure that the team channel actually makes sense, and keep the number of channels to use, what should I say, manageable amounts, right? So you can create a lot of channels, but the more you create, the harder it is for the user to navigate in the channels. Review your permissions. Okay, so in SharePoint we can break inheritance, we can do permissions on files, folders, we can really do advanced stuff with the permission things. Please don't do that in Teams. It will make things really hard for the end users to understand why are they seeing this and not seeing that, why they can edit this file and not the other file. So if you have permission requirements needing to break inheritance, to do that kind of thing, please review. You can create private channels, you can create another teams to do that. Just don't go into SharePoint, break the inheritance, and expect everything will work seamlessly in Teams. It will work, but it will give you a lot of headache in the long run. So keep your permissions in Teams. And in Teams, you have owner and members, and all members have the same permission. And if you need to hide something, create a private channel. And if private channel is not enough, create another team for that purpose. Right? All right. Guest users. Guest users are pretty scary. Hopefully not. So please. If you start using Teams, please allow the users to invite guest users. As clients refusing to do this, what happens is that the user will turn to Dropbox, even messengers to do their collaboration, and then they will continue to send a lot of things in emails. And because they are sending things in emails with external users, they continue sending emails with the internal also. So they're not using the conversation feature of Teams. They just store the file in Teams, and that's it. So please review your guest user policies and allow the users to collaborate with the guest users. Very, very important feature in SharePoint and Teams, Microsoft 365 actually. Right? I will skip this one. And yeah, so some final tips and tricks. So I have my 4 things here. First thing is limit who can create groups. By that, they cannot create. We'll limit the people who can create teams, create Yammer groups, create Power BI groups, and all of that. Because if you don't, what you actually doing is that you just install a brand new file share, and then you say do whatever you want, and all the users will go into that file share and create bunch of folders, and they do whatever they want, and you really don't have any clue about any content story where, and you really lose a lot of control. So please limit who can create groups. That is, that makes things easier for you to clean up. So I know that Mike should say just let it go and everyone can just create it, but that is the same effect that you have if you, just create a new folder, file share, and then tell the user, here's the file share, do whatever you want with it. And we know how much mess we have in our file shares, right? You can never find anything in there. Do review of your private, public, or wide groups, and then really have an assessment about guest users. And if you have the resources, build a provisioning solution for teams. Because we are limiting who can create groups, we really don't want the users to, each time they want a team, they send an email to the support team, the IT support, and then they have to wait a couple of weeks before IT support have the bandwidth to do the creation of the teams. So use some investment into provisioning a team. It can be very simple, couple of days work maximum. I do have a post about that if you want to do it yourself. Some PowerShell, some Flow, and you're good to go. And you can also use the provisioning system to define a template for the team. For example, you can control who is the owner, who's the members. You can do, for example, what members can and cannot do. The kind of thing that you have to teach the team's owner to do. You can do that with the provisioning solution. And it works pretty well, actually. All right, you can have a look at the links here when we publish the presentations. And this is the first time I'm doing online session, so please, we'd love to hear your feedback if you have some time. Yes, thank you.